Hello and welcome to Escape with me, Simon Calder. This is the podcast that takes you to the four corners of the world, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the travel guidebook writer Charlotte Hindle. Coming up today, well, my goodness me, we have all sorts of things. Charlotte, who happens to be the author of Travel with Children, will be looking at the best family travel destinations, celebrating 500 years of looking and sounding great. No, not me, Havana, our destination for 48 hours this week. But what does President Trump's attitude mean for British travellers to Cuba? All that coming up, but let's start with the talking point. Is it fair for travel firms and airlines to treble prices as they typically do during the school holidays? An awful lot of people say no. Let me just tell you, I'm looking at a petition here with over 30,000 signatures, which is demanding a price cap on flight tickets and holidays during school holidays. It says every year thousands of families look forward to a holiday in the sun during school holidays, but the airlines and the holiday companies know the school term times and hike the prices 3 times to make it impossible for a working class family to afford even a week's holiday abroad during the year. Charlotte Hindle, travel writer. Do you agree?
Is it 3 times? Do you think it is 3 times? And I do think it's tough. I obviously 100% really tough when you're looking at going away with more than one person. So if you are a family of 2, 3, 4, however many, it is very hard. But I think the line, if in terms of being travel industry, is that actually. It's very expensive if you are a tour operator or you're operating any type of travel. And actually, it's not that the holidays are more expensive during holiday times. It's that they are sort of less expensive during the other times. So it is the real value of a holiday, of a trip during those peak times.
So effectively, the travel industry, most of it loses money for most of the years, but they make it up in spades during the summer holiday. That's roughly what the government says. The response, which came in earlier this summer, says the department is sympathetic to families looking forward to a holiday, but flight prices are a matter for airlines. Travel is a competitive market with higher prices during periods of high demand. There are a few things you can do. Obviously, try and travel as much as you can when your children are not of school age, and then you would obviously travel, during those times which are outside of the holiday periods. But also, I do think that sometimes you get lucky with half terms, with your February half term, your October half term. Etc. And they can fall at different times, and so there will be a portion of the population who manages to get a cheaper holiday as a result of that. That's a postcode, lottery, I suppose, isn't it? Well, talking of postcodes, talking of locations, you can also play the Scottish game, which is doesn't involve going on holiday to Scotland, although you might go on holiday via Scotland. Traditionally, Scottish schools tend to break up at the end of June. They will then go back to school in halfway through August. Very different from England and Wales, where it tends to be 3rd week in July they break up, go back early September. And I've checked out some prices for this podcast, looking at the first Saturday of the school summer holidays for schools in Glasgow, flying to Orlando and back, £1,000. That's non-stop on Virgin Airlines, Virgin Atlantic. But if you go to Gatwick, same dates, actually a journey of about 200 miles longer, you pay £400. Now, Scottish travellers have it easier because there's fewer of them than there are of the English, but it also works if you're in the north of England and you want to go to Scotland to fly out of. So, for example, comparing that same trip out to Orlando and back in Florida, back end of August, it was still £1,000 from Gatwick, but only £700 from Scotland. So you can take advantage of that.
But also, don't forget, I mean, you do have staycations as well. So I don't believe that in the UK the prices are hiked as high as they might be during those times. Do you agree?
Well, I'm always interested to hear from people who say we were forced to pay 3 times the normal price for a holiday. You weren't forced to, you chose to. You decided that this is what we wanted to do. There is, of course, very finite demand during school holidays, particularly actually the February half term for people going skiing, and the demand is very, very strong. And you can find typically that for a flight an hour and a bit from Gatwick to Geneva, for most of the winter you'll pay possibly £80 return. Suddenly for half-term week it's £800 return, but nobody's forcing you to do that. You're choosing to do it, and if you don't like it, then certainly in terms of the Alps, very straightforward. Fly to somewhere which doesn't have seasonal demand like that. So fly to Basel in Switzerland, take the train through there. I've done that in the past and it's saved an absolute fortune. Nobody's forcing you.
What about, I mean, I know that, with a family, you do like to book ahead, you do like to plan it, know where you're going, kids get excited, etc., etc. But what about booking absolutely last minute?
Well, if you're looking at the context of the summer, and a number of families have got in touch with me saying, help, what are we going to do? And it was tending to happen sort of back end of June, early July. People were contacting me and saying, what's happening to prices? They're going through the roof. And I kind of said, well, right now they are the highest they are ever going to be, because the holiday companies know that there's lots of demand, that actually lots of people will be waking up, particularly after GCSEs and A-levels, and suddenly thinking, oh, we need a holiday, and the prices will soar. So I always say to people, particularly if they're in the south of England and they have access to a car, keep in your back pocket the concept that you might all be piling into the car, get a good value crossing over the Channel, particularly Dover to Calais, or through the Eurotunnel from Folkestone to Calais, and you can always find a perfectly pleasant campsite on the northern French coast, and you'll be able to have a reasonable priced holiday. So that's always going to be there. And then just don't blink. Wait until a few days before you want to go, because that's the point at which, very sadly, you'll quite often get cancellations coming in, because people are constrained. Maybe there's been an accident and somebody's hurt themselves, and that suddenly you will get availability. Either that, because all these companies have a booking profile and they always think, oh, there'll be people coming in the last couple of weeks paying absolute top dollar. Well, if those people don't come in, then you can wait and see. And in terms of where to look, well, you can certainly look at online travel agents such as Travel Republic, but I just concentrate on the big 3, because they sell far more holidays, and we're talking here about proper package holidays, than than every other company put together. And they are TUI, The Giant, Thomas Cook and Jet2 Holidays, and between them they will generally come up with something. And of course you can always go to your friendly high street travel agent and they will be able to help. What's your personal view, Charlotte? How do you play it? I mean, do you do anything such as, if the kids are going back just a day or two after everybody else, will you push that to the extreme, so you take a holiday as late as possible? Do you ever take them out of school, which of course is a very, very contentious subject?
I've never taken the kids out of school, but I do know people who maybe have departed one day before school has closed and actually got a better price, so that it's very difficult, but I do know people.
But do you fess up to the head teacher? Do you say what you're doing? I mean, because obviously, if it's saving you hundreds of pounds, as I suspect it will be, do you say we're doing this and we want to save money and we know that you're supposed to give us an on-the-spot fine? How does it work?
I would always be honest, right. But I know that actually it can sometimes get you into hot water. So. Yeah, I mean, I think you need to have a look maybe equally about how you bring your children up. So you would always want to bring them up to be as honest as possible. And if they know that you have lied about this, because maybe at some point a teacher or a friend or something says, "Oh, I'm really sorry, you felt really sick on the last day of term," and then actually your child knows that they weren't sick, but they were actually on a holiday. I think that's difficult. So. It might not be a popular view, but I would always be honest.
Right. Okay. And you, I mean, do you think that in the long term, what the travel industry has always talked about, which is having different holidays for different districts, something which they do all the time in France, do you think that will become a thing, or do you think if we were going to do it, it would have happened by now?
I don't think anything's happening at the moment in terms of Brexit. So maybe when politically everything has been sorted out in many, many years' time, I don't know. I actually can't see the holiday companies getting around to that. No, okay. I'm sorry. Can you?
I think genuinely there will be. In maybe a generation or two, there will be a shift away from it. And there's always people losing out, because they're right on a border. And if you're a family and you've got 1 week going here and another week going there, then it all gets very messy. People I feel really sorry for are people who work in schools who don't have children and yet still get hammered for the same amount of increase. Time to move on. Time to move to Havana. A favourite city of yours, Charlotte?
I've been once. I loved it. I would really, really like to go back.
Well, it was founded 500 years ago, and I've been lucky enough to visit there many times, not least because I did a guidebook about Cuba. And so, therefore, as you will have spotted from just the images of Havana, even if you've never been there, it does really feel like a Hollywood movie set.
Can I just say, you wrote the first guidebook to Cuba, didn't you?
The first independent guidebook to Cuba. There was one produced by the Cuban Tourist Ministry, which wasn't perhaps as objective as you might imagine. But yes, Traveller's Survival Kit to Cuba, 1990, when I was very young indeed, thank you. You've got to get to Cuba, first of all. Now, in the olden days, I will just mention them because it was very funny, you had to go on Aeroflot from Shannon. The flight came in from Moscow, refueled at Shannon. You could jump on there and then fly out to Havana. These days, you simply go non-stop on Virgin Atlantic from Gatwick, a couple of days a week. Otherwise, it's the usual old story of going via Paris or Amsterdam on KLM or its partner Air France. However, you can actually go via Istanbul. Interestingly, Turkish Airlines now going there. Long old journey, but actually, if you want to build in two incredibly exciting city breaks, then Istanbul and Havana would be an astonishing combination. You've got to stay somewhere. Now, the first time I went there, I went to the Caribbean Hotel, which is just on the edge of the old city. Absolutely great. It's exactly what you need, cheap and cheerful, put up in the 1950s. Seen slightly better days, haven't we all? But it's nice and well located and low cost. Almost directly opposite, you've got the Sevilla, which is beautiful, isn't it? A beautiful hotel featured in Our Man in Havana. But then across town in the Vedado area, you have the Nacional, which is pure Cuba. It's just dazzling Hispanic architecture in beautiful grounds, but actually not very well located. And thankfully, with a little bit of private enterprise coming into the Cuban economy, the Casa Particular, which is a private apartment with a room to rent for foreigners. You'll save money, you'll meet real Cubans, you'll have bit of an adventure. The good thing is that it's always been a place where independent travel works. It's not one of these places where in the old communist world you have to say exactly where you'll be going and what you'll be doing. Worth pointing out though, when you come into Jose Marti Airport, you've got to bring a copy of your travel insurance policy, or they will make you buy cover on arrival. The only other place I know in the world which does that, which forces you to have travel insurance, is Belarus. Some people like to go shopping, and that's up to them. You're never going to have a fantastic shopping experience, I think, in Cuba, because of all the economic embargo that has been going on since almost the dawn of time, just coming up to 60 years since the Americans imposed that. Main shopping streets in Old Havana, Calle Obispo and Calle Mercaderes, they meet at the Ambos Mundos Hotel, made famous by Hemingway, who wrote For Whom the Bell Tolls there. The one thing I'd say about shopping in Cuba and life in Cuba in general is that this is a country with two currencies. You have hard currency, which is the convertible peso, known as the CUC, because it's spelled C-U-C, and that's what you're going to be spending most of the time as a tourist. But then you can change that into ordinary pesos, or moneda nacional, and that's at a rate of just over 20 to a CUC. And you've always, when you're buying anything, got to establish whether they're talking about local pesos or convertible pesos, because it does make a difference of a factor of 20. So careful how you do that. In the Bodeguita Del Medio, which is my favourite restaurant, a very raucous music-filled joint. It's all going to be in hard currency, in the convertible pesos, but it's worth it for the great experience of doing exactly what Ernest Hemingway did. Order a mojito, which is rum,
I was going to say great mojitos.
Rum, lime, sugar, soda and mint. And this is the place where you write your own message on the walls. It's actually encouraged, and poets, politicians and many tourists have all done that. I must say the food is all right. My rule in the first guidebook that I wrote to Cuba was, if you want to lose weight, have a holiday in Cuba, because the food was so terrible and sparse. And of course the poor Cuban people, particularly in the 1990s, had a really serious, almost famine. It has got better since then, but you're still not going to think, well, I can't imagine anybody would be running culinary tours.
Can you still eat in people's houses?
Yeah, you can. These are called, thank you, good point, Paladares. A paladar is a private restaurant licensed by the state, and the idea is, again, a little bit of private enterprise, helping people to make a little bit more of a living. They have a maximum of 12 chairs. That's the largest number they're allowed to seat. And once they reach 12, that's that. And this is somewhere where it's quite often possible to get some lobster, which is quite elusive. And some say that it only actually ever appears on the black market, and it's all a little bit dodgy. I don't know what the food supply chain is, but I know that a lot of people swear by the lobster that they eat in Cuba. Having had your meal, however it was for you, then you've got to go and see the sights. And I'd say that besides walking around the old city of Havana and watching all the colour and the life and the amazing Spanish colonial mansions, which were in various stages of decrepitude.
And the Malecon.
Yeah, the Malecon, which is the sea wall looking out over to the Atlantic, looking north to Miami. An extraordinary place to be. Not a great beach, if that's what you're after. It's certainly not a city beach, but a very atmospheric location. But if you're going to see an actual formal site, I would say the Museum of the Revolution in the former presidential palace is the place to be. It focuses entirely on the conflict that began very badly in the 1950s. Of course, Fidel Castro, the late leader of Cuba, was actually arrested after the first attempt to foment revolution. Second revolution began in 1956 with the landing of the cabin cruiser Granma that's Spanish for grandma, on the coast in the southeastern corner of Cuba. That was, it was called more of a shipwreck than a landing, but Che Guevara and Fidel Castro managed to get from there to triumphantly entering Havana in 1959. They took over, and the former dictator Batista fled, and the Museum of the Revolution will tell you all about that. It's a fascinating place, and the tension with the United States is still very, very palpable there. The Americans are, of course, just 90 miles away across the Strait of Florida, and a world away politically. I always like to bring you a little surprise, and if you wander down to the harbour and go a little bit further away from the cruise port, which is, by the way, not very busy at all these days for reasons we will get onto, then you'll find there's a funny little ferry that shuttles across the harbour from the jetty about every 15 minutes or so. Just say you want to go to Casablanca. Cost you, well, last time I was there, £1. That's a couple of pence. You get a security check before you do that, because apparently these boats have been hijacked and taken to Florida before now. And then you arrive in the shadow of this beautiful fortress, La Fortaleza de San Carlos de la Cabaña, the mightiest in the Caribbean, and you can have a look around there, having had a lovely low-cost harbour voyage. So, Havana, I have always said get there quick because it's all going to change. I've been saying that since about 1990, so almost 30 years on. You can take your time. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be beautiful. Let's take advantage of the fact that Charlotte Hindle is with us, author of Travel with Children, to give us a bit of a travel masterclass on the best destinations for families. Well, surely most families listening to this are going to think, well, either a Disney theme park in Orlando, Florida, or an all-inclusive resort with a couple of pools in Turkey. That's about right, isn't it?
Oh, well, I'm probably going to shock you, actually, I suppose. I mean, I think my credentials for travelling with children is the fact that I have travelled with my children. They are now 16 and 18. We've travelled since they were very, very, very young. And I suppose the shocking bit is that children actually don't really like necessarily travelling. They want to be in one place. Of course, we can have a look at some independent travel that you can do with children, but actually I wouldn't discount booking a package, a holiday, and going to one destination, flying and flopping or using it as a base. And that's one reason why, another type of holiday which children do like, which is cruising, is very good, because again they don't like this, upping in the morning and going out and getting on the train off to somewhere else, having a look around. I know, packing up, unpacking, packing up, unpacking. But with a cruise, obviously you are in a different destination almost every day, apart from your days at sea, and you have a cabin, and they can, they like the cabin. It's travelling, but not real travelling, I suppose, really, for them. So you keep them happy, and then you keep yourself happy as well, because you are in a different destination every day, and it's been very easy to get there. Another sort of find, I suppose, late in terms of travelling, particularly with my children, are beach clubs. So, that's your sort of Nielsen Beach Club, that's your Mark Warner Beach Club, mostly in Greece, not necessarily completely in Greece. I know, there are beach clubs in Sardinia, in Croatia, in the heel of Italy now as well. But again, that's just being in one place, loads of activities for your children of any age, whether they want to be playing tennis, stand-up paddleboarding, learning how to sail, and you have a sort of healthy activity-based holiday sort of in one place. So, I mean, what's your view? I mean, I'm sure you're probably thinking, why is she not talking about lots of really adventurous, independent travel that you can do?
Well, of course, we're all feeding into this from what we learned as children ourselves, and my childhood, being brought up in a fairly large family in Crawley, I didn't go abroad till I was about 13, 14. We never took family holidays abroad until that point. And having tried abroad and discovered that, wow, this is France and everything is different, I just wanted to go on lots more. And then I effectively didn't, because we sort of stopped having family holidays. And so I always think that, I suppose it's natural, everyone will want what I would have wanted. And of course I started hitchhiking at age 12 or something, and that was a great way to get around and see the world. And I'm quite surprised that other people don't necessarily see things my way.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, in terms of travel with children, oh gosh, you get it so easy when they're young. And the first place that I took my eldest child, I think she was 9 weeks, was Lille, and which was just so easy. Eurostar. We had a lovely holiday in Lille. Obviously, it's much cheaper when children are under 2 to travel.
Well, actually, that's the rule on the airlines.
Yes.
On Eurostar, you mentioned Lille, it's now 4. And so, therefore, if you've got an under 4, then you can take them as cabin baggage, effectively.
Fantastic. So, just in terms of, packing your child up, obviously having one child is much easier than having more, and having a pushchair, and you can travel around the world like that because the child doesn't have any opinions. They are quite easy. They can just, sleep in the pushchair. I was always very careful, obviously, in terms of malarial. I never went to any malarial places with the kids until they were 10. But that is all very easy. But then I do remember travelling in Naples, and we had 2 children by that stage, and our 4-year-old suddenly started saying she wanted to do this, she wanted to do that, and it was really unusual. And suddenly, so we had 3 people that we needed to take note of, I suppose. Obviously, the older your young ones become, the more people you are trying to satisfy when you are off on a holiday.
And how long can a family holiday go on for? I mean, 16 and 18, do you think they will be travelling with you when in 5 years' time?
No, I don't think so. I thought you meant length of time, actually, and I was going to tell you.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm delighted to know about that. How long should you ideally go travelling with children for?
Well, 1 to 3 weeks, I think, unless you're doing something else, which is some type of career break with your children. But what we used to do over the summer holidays, in particular, and also Easter, I suppose, is go away several times. To different destinations. Many cities obviously do work really well in terms of children. I remember Dubrovnik is beautiful and really set up for children, and so is Split, and you get fantastic ice creams there. I remember having a very focused holiday in Paris, where we just did very few things. So we climbed the Eiffel Tower, which was fantastic, and then we actually then caught the train over to Monet's house, and then just did a little bit of culture. Sometimes you can try and fit too much in, and obviously, young children, they don't want to see everything, and they've got different priorities, and they want to stop off in the park and the playground. And in fact, I tell you, a very, very good place to go with children who, I would say, maybe under 8 is San Sebastian. In northern Spain, because it's got everything there. You've got beautiful beach, you've got an old town which is car-free, which is absolutely wonderful. You've got a harbour with old fishing boats, and along the beach there are lots of play areas. I suppose the only downside is that the restaurants in the evenings are not open until much later, although we did find a place that was open for 24 hours.
Worth pointing out that one thing they also haven't got is a direct flight link from the UK.
No,
so you have to fly into
Bilbao.
They have direct bus links from the airport in Bilbao to San Sebastian. Takes about an hour, although my preferred way is actually flying into Biarritz in southwest France, because then you've got a lovely train ride down the coast to Hindle, which is where the border is, and then you take another little narrow gauge train into San Sebastian. So well worth going to. Very good points. Thank you very much indeed. Now, somewhere I don't think many families will be travelling to is a year from now, the Tokyo Olympics are on. And what is the best strategy? Plenty of people have been asking me if you want to be a spectator at the world's greatest festival of sport. Well, let me try and address that. I've been following the Olympics for the last few decades. I'm not going to count 1996 Atlanta. That was a bit of an aberration in terms of its location. So let's start with 2000 in Sydney. The same pattern emerges every time. 2004 Athens, which by the way is 48 hours in the next Escape podcast. Beijing 2008, London 2012, Rio 2016. And I think we will see the same pattern. And what is that pattern? Every hotelier, every airline will be thinking, this is great. We are going to make an absolute fortune. There will be such demand. I remember Heathrow Airport before the 2012 Olympics saying every single seat on every single flight is going to be fully booked all the way through the Olympics. In fact, it was one of the quietest summers they had for a long time, because what the hoteliers think and what the airlines think isn't what happens. Yes, they will keep fares and room rates very high until probably maybe 3 months, maybe as little as 3 weeks before the games begin. And then they'll realise, actually, we got lots of empty seats and we've got lots of empty beds. Now, if you're looking for a high-end room in Tokyo, that possibly won't be there because the International Olympic Committee will have booked them up. But there's marvellous budget opportunities, and that's a really good thing to go for. And in terms of getting there, yeah, there's going to be, in the few days before the games actually start and immediately afterwards, if you want to go then, you will be talking about thousands of pounds, but I think you'll be able to get something perfectly decent for about £800, maybe not direct to Tokyo, but certainly via the Gulf or Scandinavia. So just wait, do not blink. It's going to be a great time to be in the city, not least because it will be empty of normal tourists. Honestly, this is what happens to cities, and so it's a great time for going around and seeing the great galleries, the museums, going and finding fantastic restaurants. You might think, oh, everywhere's going to be crowded. It's not. It's going to be a marvellous time to go there, even if you don't like sport. But the chances are you'll probably be able to find some tickets to something. So plan to head for Tokyo in 2020, but don't start doing anything about it until just a few weeks beforehand. Warning of the week, we were talking earlier about Havana. Let me tell you what's happening with President Trump's Cuba policy. We've had the economic embargo in place for almost 60 years. The effect of that is to make it illegal for effectively American companies to trade with Cuban companies. Under President Obama, towards the end of his presidency, he said, we're going to relax, we're going to encourage people-to-people exchanges so that Americans can go and talk to Cubans and Cubans can see what marvellous people we all are. And that seemed to be going terribly well until Donald Trump got in, and he's been rolling back on it. And what he did earlier this summer, he suddenly said, right, no more cruises to Havana. And that has caused all manner of problems for British tourists who perhaps were booked on cruises which were due to go in to Havana. They booked it especially because they wanted to go to Havana in an organised way. Most of the cruise lines are, to their credit, saying, while we always reserve the right to change the ports of call if government action means that we have to, in the case of Havana, because we recognise that so many people only want to go to Havana and you might not be very happy with going to Playa del Carmen in Mexico instead, we will give you a full refund if you want one. But while President Trump is in power, do not expect anything to get easier to go to Cuba. Of course, if you go direct from Europe without going to the US, it will be much easier. And Marella, the cruise arm of TUI, is still sailing there. Bargain of the week, and this is in honour of the family connection. It's anybody who's heading to Cumbria this summer, the Lakes Day Ranger. This is how to be environmentally considerate and save a fortune. And it's just one of these old Rover tickets. They were very big in the 20th century. They're still here. So you get unlimited rail travel from Lancaster up to Penrith, across to Windermere, all around the coast of Cumbria, all the stagecoach buses within Cumbria, boat trip on Lake Windermere. And this for a family is going to cost you £48, which if you've got a family of four, £12 each for unlimited travel. And the great thing is using the trains to get around Cumbria so much quicker than driving in the height of summer.
So that's a good alternative then, in terms of the cost of travel going up in holidays for families.
It certainly is, yep, and that's the same price, £48 all year. If you don't have a family, then you can still get a deal, particularly if you've got a rail card. That'll come down to £16 per person. So that's all for now. Thank you very much indeed, Charlotte Hindle, guidebook writer. We'll be back soon to help you plan your escape. Paul Goldstein is going to be joining me next time to settle the big question for anyone who appreciates nature and travel: where is the best place to watch wildlife? Meanwhile, from me, Simon Calder, the excellent technical team here at WebVid, and from Charlotte Hindle, goodbye.
Bye-bye.